I didn't lose my house in a storm, or a fire, or anything that makes sense. I lost it because someone typed the wrong number, and by the time I got back from my honeymoon, there was nothing left to come home to, and the people responsible thought they could just write me a check and move on, like 5 years of my life was a rounding error. What they didn't realize was that same mistake gave me the one thing they needed most, leverage, and I used it. My name's Daniel Harper, and if you've ever saved for something so long it starts to feel like part of your identity, you'll understand why this story still sits heavy in my chest, even now. Megan and I weren't flashy people. We didn't have family money, no big inheritances waiting in the wings, just 2 steady jobs, a shared spreadsheet, and a quiet agreement that if we kept our heads down long enough, we'd build something real, something that was ours. 5 years, that's how long it took. 5 years of skipping vacations, saying no to dinners out, driving a car that made a noise I never quite figured out but learned to ignore. We saved every bonus, every tax return, every spare dollar that didn't absolutely have to be spent. And eventually, it added up. The house wasn't big. Not even close. Just a narrow 2-story on a street called Alder Ridge, tucked between older homes with peeling paint and overgrown hedges, the kind of place people drive past without noticing. But to us, it was everything. I still remember the first time we walked through it. The floors creaked in a way that felt honest. The kitchen window looked out onto a patch of yard that Megan immediately started planting in her head. Herbs, maybe tomatoes, she said, and I just stood there thinking, yeah, this is it. We closed on the place 2 weeks before the wedding, which, in hindsight, was either brave or incredibly stupid, maybe both. But we didn't care. We were riding that kind of momentum where everything feels like it's finally falling into place. The night before we left for the honeymoon, we sat on the living room floor. No furniture yet, just 2 suitcases and a bottle of cheap champagne. Megan leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "Can you believe this is ours?" And I remember laughing, because it didn't feel real yet, like we were borrowing someone else's life for a little while. We locked the door the next morning thinking we'd be gone for 10 days, and then we'd come back and start our life for real. The honeymoon itself was simple. Nothing over the top. A small coastal town, quiet beaches, seafood that cost more than we should have spent, but felt justified somehow. We talked about paint colors, about where the couch would go, about whether we were ready for a dog, normal stuff, future stuff. There's this thing people don't tell you about moments like that. You don't realize you're standing at the edge of something fragile until it's already broken. We landed late in the evening, the kind of tired where everything feels slightly off. We picked up our car, drove back through familiar streets, and I remember feeling this low hum of excitement, like we were about to step into the life we'd been building toward. But when we turned onto Alder Ridge, something felt wrong. At first, I couldn't place it, just a sense that the street looked different, too open, maybe like a gap where there shouldn't be one. I slowed the car down, scanning the houses, counting them in my head, 1, 2, 3, and then there it was, or it wasn't. Where our house should have been, there was just dirt. Not even clean, level ground. Just this uneven patch of raw earth, tire tracks cutting through it, bits of broken concrete, and wood scattered like leftovers no one bothered to clean up. It looked less like demolition and more like something had been ripped out of the ground. I actually drove past it the first time, convinced I'd miscounted, that maybe we'd taken a wrong turn or the GPS had glitched or something stupid like that. I circled the block, came back slower, heart starting to do that thing where it doesn't quite keep a steady rhythm anymore. Megan didn't say anything at first. She just leaned forward in her seat, staring out the windshield like if she focused hard enough, the house might reappear. "Dan," she said finally, and her voice had this edge to it I'd never heard before. "Where is it?" I didn't answer, because I didn't have one. We pulled over across the street, and for a few seconds, neither of us moved, the engine still running, headlights washing over that empty space like it was going to reveal something we were missing. That's when I saw Mr. Calloway, our neighbor from 2 houses down, standing on his porch. Except he wasn't sitting in his usual chair, wasn't sipping coffee or reading the paper. He was just standing there, hands hanging at his sides, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. I stepped out of the car, and the night air felt colder than it should have been. Or maybe that was just me. "What happened?" I called out, already knowing I wasn't going to like the answer. He walked over slowly, and as he got closer, I could see his eyes were red, not like he'd just woken up, like he hadn't slept. "They came 3 days ago," he said, voice low, uneven. "Big machines, state contractors." I felt this strange disconnect, like I was listening to someone else's story. "Came for what?" "For your place," he said, and then paused like he wished he could take it back. "They said it was scheduled." Scheduled. That word stuck in my head in a way I couldn't shake, like it belonged in a different reality. "No," I said, shaking my head. "No, that's not possible. We just bought it. We were." "They didn't knock," he cut in quietly. "Didn't leave anything. Just showed up and started tearing it down." Megan stepped out of the car then, walking past me toward the lot. Slow at first, then faster, like she needed to get close enough to prove it wasn't real. "What about our stuff?" she asked, her voice breaking halfway through the sentence. "Everything inside." Mr. Calloway looked away, and that was answer enough. "They didn't stop," he said. "Once they started, it was over in a few hours." I remember the sound Megan made, not quite a sob, not quite a scream, something in between that I'd never heard before and hope I never hear again. I walked onto what used to be our property, my shoes sinking slightly into the loose dirt, and there, near the edge, was a wooden board hammered into the ground, cheap, temporary, like an afterthought. I wiped some dirt off it with my hand and read the words out loud, even though part of me didn't want to. "Demolition completed under state order." Below that, a printed address, 2891 Alder Ridge. I stared at it for a long second, then looked up at the empty lot, then back at the number. Our house was 2,873. 8 digits, and they got one of them wrong. That was all it took. One number, and everything we had, everything we were about to start, was gone. And the worst part, the part that didn't hit me until later, was that somewhere, someone had signed off on that. Someone had looked at a form, glanced at a number, and decided it was close enough. Standing there in the dirt, with Megan crying behind me and the remains of our life scattered under my feet, I felt something shift, not all at once, just a small, quiet change, like a switch flipping somewhere deep inside. Because in that moment, I realized this wasn't just an accident. It was negligence. And negligence can be expensive. If you want me to keep going, I'll tell you what happened when I walked into their office the next morning and why. 2 weeks later, their entire highway project came to a dead stop. I barely slept that night. Not because I wasn't tired, but because every time I closed my eyes, I saw that empty lot again, that raw patch of dirt where our life was supposed to begin, and my brain kept trying to make sense of it. Like if I replayed it enough times, I'd find the part where it didn't happen, but there wasn't one. Megan stayed curled up on the motel bed we checked into at 2 in the morning, still wearing the same clothes from the flight. She hadn't said much after we left Alder Ridge, just held onto my arm like if she let go, something else might disappear too. I sat at that tiny desk by the window, the kind bolted to the wall like they expect people to try and take it, and spread out every document we had, closing papers, inspection reports, insurance, mortgage, anything that proved we owned that house, that it existed, that we hadn't imagined the last 5 years. And somewhere between the paperwork and the silence, the shock started turning into something sharper. Anger. Yeah, but not the kind where you yell and throw things, the kind that gets quiet, focused, like it's looking for somewhere to land. By 8 the next morning, I was standing in front of the Regional Infrastructure Office, a squat concrete building that looked like it had been designed to discourage hope. No windows on the lower level, just a set of glass doors and a metal detector that beeped even when no one walked through it. Inside, everything smelled like stale coffee and recycled air, fluorescent lights humming overhead, people moving in lines that didn't quite make sense. A woman at the front desk barely looked up when I approached. "Can I help you?" "Yeah," I said, sliding the demolition notice across the counter. "I need to talk to someone about this." She glanced at it for maybe half a second, typed something into her computer, then handed me a number printed on a thin strip of paper. "Take a seat. Someone will call you." I stood there for a moment, waiting for, I don't know, some sign that this was serious, that someone understood what had happened, but she was already on to the next person. So I sat, and I waited. 43 minutes. I counted. When my number finally flashed on the screen, I was directed to a small office where a man in his late 40s sat behind a desk that was too clean to belong to someone who actually did anything messy. His nameplate read, Thomas Reed, Project Coordinator. He didn't stand when I walked in, just gestured to the chair across from him. "What seems to be the issue, Mr. Harper, is it?" he said, glancing at the file he'd already pulled up. "The issue," I said, keeping my voice steady, "is that your contractors demolished my house while I was out of town." He nodded once slow, like he'd heard this kind of thing before, which, somehow, made it worse. "Yes, we've been made aware of a discrepancy involving that address." "Discrepancy," I repeated, letting the words sit there for a second. "You tore down the wrong house." He folded his hands on the desk, calm, practiced. "It appears there was a clerical error during the property verification phase. The contractor acted based on the information provided." I leaned forward slightly. "And no one thought to double-check the number before sending in demolition equipment." A small pause, just enough to acknowledge the question without actually answering it. "These situations, while unfortunate, are addressed through a standard compensation process," he said, sliding a folder toward me, "based on the assessed value of the property." I opened it, already feeling that tightness in my chest again, and there it was, a number printed in bold. 98,000. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so far off it didn't feel real. "We paid $235 for that house," I said, looking up at him. "The assessed value is determined by county records," he replied smoothly, "not recent market transactions." "And everything inside?" I asked. "Our belongings, furniture, clothes, documents, things that can't be replaced?" He shook his head, almost sympathetically. "Homeowners are expected to vacate and secure personal property prior to scheduled demolition." I stared at him, trying to process the sentence. "We were never notified." "There was a notice issued," he said. "To the wrong address," I shot back. Another pause, slightly longer this time. "I understand this is frustrating, Mr. Harper." "No," I said, cutting him off, still calm. But there was something underneath it now, something harder. "You don't." The room went quiet. Because this wasn't just about money. Not really. It was about the way he said it, like this was a minor inconvenience, like we'd misplaced a package and it might show up eventually. "I want to see the documentation," I said after a moment. "All of it, permits, approvals, whatever authorized this demolition." He hesitated, just briefly, then nodded. "I can provide copies of the relevant materials." "Good," I said, standing up. "Because I'm not signing anything until I do." He didn't try to stop me, didn't argue, just made a note on his pad as I walked out, like I was another item on a list he'd get to eventually. But I wasn't. Not anymore. By the time I got back to the motel, Megan was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone. Not scrolling, not typing, just holding it. "How'd it go?" she asked without looking up. I dropped the folder onto the table. "They offered us 98,000. That got her attention. She looked up slowly. "That's not even half." "I know. And our stuff." I shook my head. She let out a breath that sounded more like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "So basically, they erased our life and want to pay us like it was a used car." "Yeah," I said quietly. "Something like that." We sat there for a minute, the weight of it settling in again. Heavier this time because now it had numbers attached to it, official ones. Then I pulled out the stack of documents Reed had given me. Permits, maps, approvals stamped with signatures and dates, the kind of paperwork that looks final, unquestionable. I didn't start reading them right away, not really. I just flipped through it first, scanning, letting my eyes catch on anything that felt off. Megan stood up and walked over, wrapping her arms around herself as she looked down at the pages. "What are you looking for?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "But there's something here, there has to be. Because mistakes like that, they don't happen in isolation, not at this scale, not with that many moving parts. Someone missed something, or ignored something, and if I could find it." That's when I saw it. Buried halfway through a packet labeled Environmental Compliance, Phase 2 Expansion, a section highlighted in yellow, probably by some overworked assistant who didn't think it mattered. Condition 14, I read out loud. All listed properties must be individually verified and confirmed vacated prior to demolition activity. I read it again slower this time. Individually verified. Confirmed vacated. Megan leaned in slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, feeling that quiet anger shift again, sharpening into something else, something almost precise. "They can't just assume a house is empty. They have to confirm it, physically, before they tear it down. And they didn't do that with ours, she said. No, I replied. They didn't. Because if they had, they would have known. They would have seen the boxes, the clothes, the fact that we just moved in, the simple, obvious signs that this wasn't an abandoned property waiting to be cleared. Which meant this wasn't just a typo. It was a violation. A clear one. And violations, especially on projects this size, come with consequences. I felt it then, that shift I mentioned before, but stronger this time, like something locking into place. They thought this was about compensation. They thought they could calculate a number, cut a check, and move on. But this wasn't about what they owed us. This was about whether they were even allowed to keep building at all. I looked at Megan, and for the first time since we got back, there was something different in her expression, not just grief or anger, but a flicker of something else. Hope, maybe. Or at least, the possibility of it. What are you going to do? She asked. I picked up the document, tapping the highlighted line with my finger. I'm going to stop them, I said. Not yell, not threaten, not beg. Stop them. Because if they broke the rules to destroy our home, then the rules were exactly how I was going to break their project. And the best part? They'd already handed me everything I needed. If you want to hear how a single line in a document shut down an entire highway expansion, and why they came back to us 2 weeks later sounding very different, just say the word, and I'll keep going. I didn't file the complaint right away, not because I was hesitating, but because I wanted to do it once, and do it in a way they couldn't brush off, couldn't delay, couldn't bury under another stack of paperwork and polite language. So I spent the next 48 hours turning that one highlighted line into something solid. I went back through everything, timelines, signatures, inspection logs. I called the county office, asked questions I probably sounded too calm asking, requested verification records for our address. And what I got back was exactly what I suspected, nothing. No physical inspection logged. No vacancy confirmation. No sign that anyone had actually stood on our property before they sent in machines to erase it. Which meant condition 14, the one they'd signed, stamped, and agreed to, wasn't just overlooked. It was ignored. And once I knew that, the path forward wasn't complicated anymore. It was procedural. I filed a formal objection with the State Oversight Board, not about compensation, not about emotional damages, not even about the house itself. I kept it narrow, precise, focused on compliance, attached copies of everything, purchase records dated 2 months prior, utility activation logs, photos from the week before our wedding, boxes still unpacked, curtains not even hung yet, proof that anyone who bothered to look would have known the house was occupied. I ended it with one line, simple, direct. Demolition conducted without required verification of occupancy, in violation of Environmental Compliance Condition 14. No adjectives, no anger, just facts. And then I waited. 7 days. That's all it took. The letter came in the morning, official seal, formal language, the kind that doesn't raise its voice because it doesn't have to. Immediate suspension of all demolition and construction activities associated with Phase 2 expansion pending investigation. I read it twice, not because I didn't understand it, but because I wanted to feel it land. Then I handed it to Megan. She didn't say anything at first, just read it, lips pressed together, eyes moving slower with each line. And when she looked up at me, there was something there I hadn't seen since before we left for the honeymoon. Relief, mixed with something sharper. They actually stopped it, she said quietly. Yeah, I replied. They did. And they really did. I drove out to the project site later that afternoon, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to see it, wanted to know this wasn't just words on paper. Miles of partially cleared land. Heavy equipment sitting idle like someone had hit pause in the middle of a sentence, excavators frozen mid-dig, piles of dirt untouched, orange barriers flapping in the wind with no one there to move them. It felt wrong, like a machine that big wasn't supposed to just stop. A couple of workers were gathered near a truck, talking in low voices. One of them glanced over at me, then back at the others, and I had this strange awareness that, in some indirect way, I was the reason they were standing there instead of working. That thought didn't feel good, not exactly, but it didn't feel wrong either. Because every day that site stayed quiet cost them. Permits delayed, deadlines missed, investors calling. The kind of pressure that builds fast and doesn't go away on its own. 2 weeks. That's how long it took before they came back. Not a letter this time. Not a generic email with carefully chosen wording. They showed up in person. 3 of them. Thomas Reed, the same man from before, but he looked different now. Less composed, tie slightly off-center, the kind of detail you don't notice unless you're looking for cracks. And 2 others. One I recognized from the documents as legal counsel. The other introduced himself as a project director. We met in a temporary office they'd set up near the site. A folding table, plastic chairs, the kind of place built for efficiency, not comfort. No one offered coffee this time. "Mr. Harper," Reed started, and there was a noticeable shift in his tone, less rehearsed, more careful. "We'd like to resolve this matter as quickly as possible." I leaned back slightly in my chair, not in a confrontational way, just steady. "I'm listening," I said. The lawyer spoke next, smooth, controlled. "We're prepared to offer full market compensation based on your recent purchase, reimbursement for documented personal property, and additional damages for inconvenience and distress." Inconvenience. That word almost made me smile. "And?" I asked. A brief pause. Then the project director stepped in. "We're also willing to prioritize reconstruction of your home. Same design, same location, expedited approvals. You'd be moved to the front of the queue." There it was, the shift. 2 weeks ago, I was sitting in a small office being told what I should accept. Now they were sitting across from me, asking what it would take. I let the silence sit for a second, long enough for them to feel it. Then I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table. "You're not rebuilding it fast," I said, calm, even. "You're rebuilding it right." The lawyer nodded slightly. "Of course." "No," I said, shaking my head. "Not of course, because if it was of course, we wouldn't be here." Another pause. I could see Reed shift in his seat. Not uncomfortable exactly, just aware this wasn't going the way it had the first time. "Here are my terms," I continued, not raising my voice, not rushing, just laying them out. "Full compensation, not based on your assessments, based on what we actually paid, plus everything we lost inside, documented or not." The lawyer opened his mouth slightly, probably to push back, then closed it again. "Second, the house gets rebuilt exactly as it was intended, not a version of it. Not something close, the same layout, same specifications. I don't want an upgrade. I don't want a downgrade. I want what we had." The project director nodded, slowly this time. "And third," I said, and this was the part one cared about more than I expected, "independent verification for every single property on this project. Not internal, not your contractors, third party, documented before anything else gets demolished." That one landed heavier, because that wasn't just about us anymore. That was about changing how they operated. "That will significantly impact timelines," the director said carefully. I met his gaze. "So will another violation." Silence again, longer this time. The kind that stretches just enough to make everyone in the room aware that a decision is being made, not by committee, not by policy, but right there. Finally, the lawyer nodded once. "We can agree to those terms." Just like that. No argument. No negotiation. Because they didn't have leverage anymore. I did. The paperwork took another week. Signatures, revisions, language tightened and reviewed from every angle. But eventually, it was done, binding, enforceable, the kind of agreement that doesn't leave room for interpretation. Construction on our house started before the rest of the project resumed, just like they promised, and for a while, I drive past the site and watch it come back to life in pieces, foundation first, then framing, then walls, like someone was rewinding a moment that had gone wrong. It wasn't the same, though. Not really. Because even when everything looks identical, you know what happened underneath. The day we got the keys again, Megan stood in the doorway for a long time before stepping inside, not hesitating, just taking it in. "It looks the same," she said. "Yeah," I replied. But we both knew it wasn't. Not completely. Because something had shifted not just in the house, but in us. People like to call this a revenge story, and I get why it has all the right pieces: mistake, loss, comeback, leverage, but it never felt like revenge to me. It felt like correction, like forcing something broken to acknowledge itself. And here's the part one still think about. Those workers I saw standing around that first day the project stopped, the delays, the money lost, the pressure that rippled out from one decision, it didn't just affect the people who made the mistake. It affected everyone connected to it. So the question I keep coming back to is this: was it justice? Or was it just a different kind of damage? I don't have a clean answer for that. But I know this. If I had taken their first offer, signed the paper, accepted the number, walked away, none of it would have changed. And maybe that's the part that matters most. If you made it this far, I want to hear what you think. Was I right to shut the whole project down over one house? Or should I have taken the money and moved on? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because stories like this don't really have simple endings, and I'm curious where you land on it.